What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update of sorts to a video I did a few days ago talking about D&D's OGL drama and what that could mean for video games in particular, as this channel is centered around video games. As the title surely told you, Paizo, the publisher of Pathfinder, has put out a statement around D&D's potential new OGL and what they plan to do going forward. Though to give a little bit of background to this video and fill in the people who aren't aware, the very short version of this is that for a couple decades, Dungeons & Dragons has used an OGL to allow people to make and create for Dungeons & Dragons without having to sign contracts, all that stuff, and a lot of people have used it. Businesses have grown up around this, as the wording was centered around it being a permanent thing. Very recently, talk has been around about how D&D is under-monetized, and a new OGL has been floated and leaked, and we were supposed to see that update literally the day this video is going live, though I imagine it has been delayed. But the new update to the OGL, or new version, essentially made it impossible for third-party creators to do anything with Dungeons & Dragons without turning literally all of it over to Wizards of the Coast to use however they see fit, which needless to say would destroy that community. But in addition to third-party creators around the TTRPG, a lot of other companies use that OGL for a variety of things. Pathfinder uses it for most of their system, and we'll talk more about that here obviously as we move through this statement. But my own personal interest in why I'm talking about this on a video game channel is mostly due to the fact that a lot of my favorite games use a version of the OGL, or D&D systems and rules, and thus the specifics of this affect great things outside of just the TTRPG space. Now, on an official word from Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, D&D, etc., we have gotten nothing. 2 days ago they said they'd make a statement soon, and we have yet to hear from them. Well, Paizo got tired of waiting, and yesterday, from the time of this video, has released their own statement and what they plan to do, and I think this statement alone clarifies a lot of questions I had about the state of Pathfinder, because Pathfinder publishes via a license the Pathfinder video games, which are a huge feature on this channel. Wrath of the Righteous is a personal favorite of mine, and what doesn't really feature on the channel, but something true of myself, I own a significant amount of Paizo's Pathfinder products that are on the shelf behind me right as I speak these words into a microphone, so I have a lot of personal interest. Which brings us to Paizo's statement. The long and short of it is, they're planning on a system-neutral open RPG license to flat out replace the OGL with. They're doing this in partner with a lot of other people, and once the license is fully developed, they plan on handing it off to a non-profit company that deals with open source as a rule, thus making a license people can use to publish things in a system-neutral manner, and then giving it to a neutral third party that as a nonprofit has no interest in changing it anyway. But from there, let's actually start breaking down the statement and what it actually says, etc. Though do keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer, and if you want the legal specifics of all this, outside of just he said, she said, I guess we're all going to have to wait for the Legal Eagle video that I'm sure will happen eventually. But to kick it off, Paizo essentially says that like everyone else, they've been waiting on what Wizards of the Coast is actually going to do. As from Paizo's standpoint, the OGL has been a mutually beneficial license that should not, and according to them cannot, be revoked, which is what prompted Paizo to make the statement to begin with. From here, they make the very direct claim that they do not believe that the OGL 1.0 or 1.0a were intended to be revocable or able to be deauthorized, however you want to put it. And this is largely due to Paizo's own history as a company, as I'm sure many of the people watching this video, even from my own audience, are perfectly aware. Paizo kind of split off from D&D. They used to work there. Both the owner and president were leaders at the Dungeons & Dragons team at one point. The people involved used to publish a magazine for D&D, so they're very aware of the wording and what the intent was. The co-founder of the law firm that Paizo uses, Brian Lewis, who works at Azora Law, was the attorney for Wizards who came up with the legal framework for the OGL when it was created. Paizo's also worked very closely with Ryan Dancy, who was the person who made the OGL in the first place. So, using all of that very direct involvement, Paizo feels that this cannot be revoked, that it's not intended to be so, nor can they do so. And they go on to say that they are prepared to argue that in court if need be, but frankly they would rather not do so because they don't have any interest in Wizards' new OGL, and that they have a different idea to begin with. Now this next section talks about Paizo's evolution. You see, originally, when they brought out Pathfinder 1st edition, they kept a lot of the Wizards' wording and systems because it was expeditious to do so, and the OGL existed. However, as Pathfinder has grown in popularity and extended its reach, and in their non-RPG products, including their novels, they leaned into their own stuff rather than the Dungeons & Dragons stuff. And when Pathfinder 2e came around, the OGL was much less impactful, and I mentioned this part in particular because in my own previous video, I talked about how Pathfinder 2e didn't really use much of the OGL. And here we have in Paizo's own words saying that Pathfinder 2e is published under the OGL, but it doesn't actually really use any of it. And they only published it with the OGL to allow other companies to use Paizo's work, which means a few things. For starters, Pathfinder 1e doesn't get anything actively published for it at this point from Paizo, so that's not really a concern. And from this word, it sounds like Pathfinder 2e will just switch to this new license that they're making, which should pretty much resolve any issues. Their currently planned stuff that's already using that license and is in the pipeline will continue as expected, but they'll be switching it to their own license as soon as they can. Now from there, however, Paizo goes on to basically explain their plans for an open RPG creative license that they are referring to as ORC, or the ORC, and that the license will be built system agnostic for independent game publishers under the legal guidance of Azora Law, a law firm that works for Paizo, as well as several other game publishers. However, Paizo is going to pay for all of this legal work. They then invite more people to join them, but currently, Paizo, Kobold Press, Chaosium, Legendary Games, Rogue Genius, Green Ronin, and a variety of others have agreed to participate and work to make this license the most useful it can be. And then the last part of the statement clarifies a few things as well, mostly stuff I've already mentioned, that the ORC will not be owned by Paizo, nor will it be owned by any company who makes money publishing RPGs. Azora Law is going to handle the legal side of this to make sure that no company being bought, sold, changing management, or attempting to rescind any rights, nullify sections, etc. will be possible, and then that after the license is complete, they plan on handing it off to a nonprofit. Then they explain that as it stands, with several projects actually being printed right now, that a few months of products will still have the OGL 1.0a in there, and then while the creative license is still being worked on, they simply will continue publishing without a license, period, because as they stated farther up in the statement, they don't actually need to use the OGL at this point. And then once this new license is finished, they'll be using it instead. And then they finish out the statement by taking a couple shots at some of the wording that has been used with the OGL changes, which was fun. But now that that's all out of the way, let's actually talk about what this means. So, personally, I am incredibly happy to see this, for a variety of reasons, but not least because if you follow the channel at all, Pathfinder's a big deal to me. I enjoy it a lot, so I think it's good that they're moving away from D&D altogether, even its license, and that they're doing so in a way that benefits everyone, not just themselves. But furthermore, it also assuages some concerns of my own about the potential for further Pathfinder games, what the licensing situation around that would look like, and even just beyond video games, knowing exactly what's going on with Pathfinder and Starfinder on the TTRPG level, which I also purchased things for, is nice to know. So to wrap this up, overall, this seems like a really great solution for just about everybody, at least at face value, though obviously we'll know a little more once the license is actually in place. But as someone, and most relevantly to the channel, I would imagine, as a channel, knowing that there will be an option for people who want to use these types of rule sets and bring them to video games without having to be forced into a deal with Wizards of the Coast specifically, is honestly great news, because some of my favorite games use some version of the systems or just straight up the OGL altogether. And while several of them have direct deals and contracts with Wizards of the Coast and don't rely on the OGL, changes to that system and burning your own trust and bridges makes people hesitant to do business with you, which could result in fewer games. But hopefully this will be a solution to that, which is why I wanted to cover it. And I'm honestly glad to see Paizo leading the charge on this one, as I am a big fan of Pathfinder. So that is all I've got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned a few things, and by all means, let me know how you feel about this down below, because I must admit I'm very curious how Wizards of the Coast responds now, because it looks like Paizo, rather than trying to fight D&D, is just going their own way altogether, arguably in a better way for everyone. But that's all I've got. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.